Hi, my name is Emily Kern-Swaffer. I'm the Community Gardens Director with Garden City Harvest, and today we are in the Providence Garden, and I am going to show you how to winterize your garden bed and how to compost in place. So often in the fall, as you're taking out some of your crops that are done producing, most people throw those in the compost pile, which is great. You can definitely do that. But you can also compost in place. So you can actually leave the green organic material and chop it up and incorporate it into the soil and then help build your soil and add all the nutrients back into the soil. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. So over here, we have a green bean bed. And one of the first things you do when you winterize your garden bed is you want to get rid of all of the weeds. So that's something I already did. You can see I have my bucket of weeds here. And I have this digging fork, which is one of my favorite tools for this project. We just used it earlier today to harvest potatoes, and then I used it to weed my bed. It also works well for pulling up really any plants. So for example, I'm going to remove this flower. It's a little too stocky to incorporate into my garden bed. The vegetables and plant material that are good to incorporate into your garden bed are really like leafy, fleshy things. So beans and bean leaves make a great example. Zucchini and summer squash, cucumbers, winter squash leaves, those are all great things that can be incorporated back into the soil. A few others would maybe be radishes, lettuces, mustard greens. I'm just looking around at what we have. You could certainly do kale. The one thing to keep in mind is you don't want to incorporate any plant material that has a pest or a disease. So don't incorporate your kale if it's covered in aphids. A lot of our pests and diseases live in the soil, and so you would just be keeping those in the soil, and they would be a problem for you next year. So make sure there's no pests and no disease. And I'll just show you real quick how to use the digging fork if you're unfamiliar with it to pop out this flower. So you just use your body weight on your foot to put the fork into the ground, and then you kind of pop it up, and it works really well. It kind of saves, I like to use it because it saves my wrists instead of using like a hand tool. And then I want to keep that good soil, so I'm going to shake out that root ball. And I'm going to put this, if you have a garden plot with us at a community garden, this would go in our weed or stock pile. Like I said, it's just a little too stocky. It won't break down as quickly in the garden beds over one winter. So we'll save this for later. If you're at home, you can cut it up into really small pieces and it'll break down in like a house compost system, or you could just set it aside or toss it in the trash or take it to Garden City Compost. I'm also going to take out this calendula. So saved some things for you to demonstrate. Again, shaking off that soil. Oop, I have a microphone cord that is caught on the plants. All right, so now we literally just have beans in this plot, which is great. And I use the fork to weed, but now I'm going to use the shovel. So when we say chop and incorporate plants into the bed, what we mean is using the sharp end of the shovel to cut the plants like this. And you're going to try and break it up into as small of pieces as possible, because that'll just mean it'll break down faster. And I'm just going to go down the line. Something else you can do if it's a bigger plant than a bean is you can cut it with some garden snips at the base of the plant. So we're going to leave the roots in the ground and just cut the upper part off. And again, those roots are going to break down in improve your soil. So just like that. You know, if the chopping is too tiring, you can certainly use the snips to cut the plants into smaller pieces. It's the same idea. It'll just speed up decomposition. And we want things to decompose pretty fast because we're going to be planting in this bed next year. So we want it to decompose over the winter mostly. I'm going to return to the shovel. So this is just chopping, breaking up that plant matter. Beans are great because they're nitrogen fixing, so those roots are releasing nitrogen when I cut them back like this. Right over here we actually have a cover crop. It's a crimson clover, which is another nitrogen fixer, which is another good one for us to chop. So I'm just going to demonstrate with this one row because you'll get the sense of it. So back here, once you chop it up, you're going to want to incorporate it. And what we mean by that, people say incorporate or turn it into the soil. So we're just going to take the shovel, going to turn the soil over it. This is another opportunity to do another little chop. And so what we're doing is getting more soil contact on there, speeding up decomposition. And I would say, you know, digging down 6 to 8 inches is totally fine. So like a shovel depth. I've not had luck. If you just chop and drop with our winter and season, I've not had luck with things decomposing fast enough. So this is really important. And it does keep your garden looking a little neater for passerbyers. Okay. If the plant material is really dry or it's a really windy day, I'd recommend watering it. It'll kind of weigh it down and it'll also speed up decomposition. So that is how you can turn your vegetable plant matter into the soil. Again, we don't want to do that with weeds. That is one way to do it. We're going to do that with most of our garden beds here. And we're just beginning. The other thing you can do if you don't want to chop as much is you can dig a trench and lay your plant matter in the trench and then bury it and again compost in place. So you're making a little compost pile in your garden bed. So I have something set up behind me here. So I dug a trench. I weeded this bed and then I dug a trench. So, you know, depending on what you want to do, you could make this you could make this wider. You don't really need to go much deeper. And this is, I'm just going to put the plant material in there. Again, I do want to chop it up with my snips or my shovel to break it down. This is a zucchini that actually I took out of another bed just for this. But chopping it up, kind of smashing it. And then I'm just going to cover it with soil. So I'm going to fill back my trench. And this will be really good for decomposition. So it's going to be really in the ground. Just like that. So, you know, this time of year, you don't need to worry too much about like leveling your garden because you'll probably do that in the spring. But so I'll just continue doing that through the rest of my trench by laying in plant matter, chopping it up, and then covering it. And that is going to break down and add lots of good nutrients back into our soil.